Hey, everybody. Welcome back, and thanks for joining us for Business Talk today. I am really excited to have our guest, appreciate his time, Matt Rizzetta. He is the president and CEO of N6A Agency. I actually interviewed him on Think Business podcast, and he was great, and he's been getting great downloads, and I've been getting great feedback on his interview. So I asked him to be part of Business Talk, and his company, N6A, is a leading brand communications agency based in New York City. And he has an amazing company, and it's considered one of the #1 fastest growing agencies in the entire United States. Matt, thanks so much for taking time to answer some Q&A. So just giving everybody a little bit more info on you, tell everybody just before we hop into some Q&As that have come in over the last couple of weeks, a little bit about you and your company and what you do and who you service and all that other great and exciting stuff.
Sure. And John, great to speak to you. It's always good hanging out with you, and really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks.
My name is Matt Rizzetta. I'm the founder and CEO of N6A Agency, N6A. We are 9 years old as a company. We specialize in PR and marketing services. We have about 50 or so employees across 3 offices. Our headquarters are here in New York City. We also have offices in Toronto and Boulder. We work with clients across about 3 different industries. So no matter what industry your audience happens to be playing in, chances are we have a client in their space. And, we specialize in anything from media relations, content programs, awards, speaking, social media services, a little bit of design as well. And that's our MO. Love it.
Love it. All right, so let's dive into some questions because I think what you do, I think, is so interesting. So let's just start with some questions that I think have come in that are pretty, that I hear all the time. And that is, Matt, can you kind of talk about the difference between PR, marketing, and advertising? Sometimes as a business PR or my marketing department, we never know which one to do first.
Sure. So look, starting with PR, PR really is all about building your brand credibility through earned channels, not through paid channels. So it's all about endorsements and testimonials from outside, third-party, neutral pundits, right? So that's really the PR game. It's all about earned communications. When you get into marketing, PR obviously lives as a subset of marketing, but marketing spreads across both earned and paid channels. So PR would live under marketing, as would social media, as would some elements of advertising, design, so on and so forth. And then advertising is really just exclusively focused on, for the most part, on paid media. So anything, in 2018, that could mean anything from, paid social advertising, content, sponsored content, traditional advertising across broadcast or print media. All of that would fit under an advertising umbrella.
Okay, good. That's good. I find, do you find that it's sometimes that it's confusing for people?
Yeah, look, I can tell you firsthand, for someone who is in the industry, even the lines are constantly getting blurred. On a daily basis, they're becoming even more blurred. And what used to be a very black and white space like PR, has kind of crept in on other marketing and paid channels. So it's a lot. The lines have become a lot more blurred in our industry than they have ever been, frankly.
Yeah. And I think sometimes with social media, I think people don't know, is that PR? Is that marketing? Is it, I think that actually helps kind of blur it a little bit more.
Totally. And it's interesting too, John, that the way the marketing services climate is working today with social media, a lot of times, and this is why I think there's a lot of confusion on how to define each one of those subsets, because a lot of times you're spreading one piece of content across multiple channels. So for example, if we're working with a client on the PR side and we get them a great piece of coverage, earned media coverage, in the New York Times or in the Wall Street Journal or whatever it might be, editorial coverage, which would clearly be a PR result, the result no longer ends at the outcome. Now once you get that result, your job just begins. And, the next step is, how are you leveraging that result across social media? Maybe you spend a little bit of money to take some sponsored ads out, and leverage that result. And then now all of a sudden, something that began as a PR result has clearly spilled into, paid media, advertising, marketing. So you have a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. Here's another question that came in, which is, how do you look at how big, or if you should even have an internal marketing team, or can you outsource it all, or what's the combination of the two?
Look, we work with clients. It's a great question, John. We work with clients, all shapes and sizes. Some of them have internal teams that we work hand in hand with. Some, we basically are their marketing department essentially is us. We're an extension of their team. They don't have an in-house team. We're sort of a replacement for their in-house team. And then in some cases, we actually, occasionally will lose a client because they elect to go with an in-house team instead of an agency. So I've kind of seen it all, John. And what I would say is that a lot of it in our experience comes down to just the philosophy of the organization. And, obviously there's budget restraints and there's budget considerations as well. But overall, sort of the in-house versus agency debate really is a philosophical debate. The benefits of an agency, I'm kind of generalizing now, but the benefits of an agency typically are that the agency has a depth of knowledge and has multiple resources spread across, several disciplines. And, you have specialists in different categories that in aggregate really help the client or the brand, right? Whereas the benefit of the in-house team is that you have a resource that is, full-time, fully committed to living and breathing your company on an in-house basis. And a lot of times, in our experience, it's just a philosophical question. The leadership at the company, what do they believe in? Do they like that full-time, live and breathe our company nonstop model, or do they like the idea of having, many resources that are specialists that are dedicated to a little bit of their account, and kind of the sum of the parts is greater than the in-house team?
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that was a great review. And you said something earlier that this question came in from a bunch of people, and I get to ask this all the time. And I don't really ever know fully how to really answer it as specifically as I think you can. But people always say, what should my marketing budget be? Because a lot of times I'll refer people to, I know a lot about marketing and I love marketing and I help people with marketing, but I'm not a marketing company. So I'm always referring out.
Sure.
And so I've referred some people to you and, some people who need somebody who's local, but I never know really how to answer that question. And they'll say to me, what should my marketing budget be? Because I hear that it should be 10% of my profit. I don't think anybody really knows. So what's the answer?
Look, that's the $1 million question, right? Or depending on how big the business is, maybe the $100 question. But
right. Well, hopefully it's the bigger amount for your client.
Look, I think a lot of that is also a philosophical question. I don't want to dance around it. I'll say in general, the triggers or the range, sort of from the low end to the high end, and I'm generalizing again, but it's usually somewhere between 5 and 15% of your operating budget. And then, within that range, a lot of it generally comes down to the philosophy of the leadership team. If you're a leadership team that really believes in marketing and, sees marketing as a critical channel to your growth, you're probably going to err toward the higher end of that range. If you're a leadership team that wants to invest in other areas, whether it's IT, whether it's sales, whether it's R&D work, whatever it might be, you might be on the lower end of that spectrum. But I would say the 5 to 15 range is generally the range that we see clients and ourselves, frankly, living in. And then just within that range, it really just comes down to what your philosophy is and how important how critical of a channel do you see marketing for your growth?
Okay, good. All right, good. That's a good answer. I think that'll give people something to chew on. Here's another question. How important is it to define your messaging and why before you do marketing? And I can speak on this because this question came in from a couple of people, and I think personally that's one of the first things I do with companies is to make sure they have that grounded. But I'd like your perspective on it. How important is that in the whole marketing, PR, advertising world.
I mean, it's critical. I would say that's the sine qua non of all marketing strategy, right? The first thing you have to do is define your messaging, and otherwise the entire strategy will fall apart. If your messaging and go-to-market positioning strategy is not rock solid, clearly defined, sustainable from day one, any subsequent strategy you execute on from a marketing standpoint is going to fall on deaf ears, or it's going to come across as disingenuous or inconsistent. So if you don't nail that messaging out of the gate, you could have the best strategy in the world, best marketing strategy in the world, but frankly, you're not going to execute with any success without messaging having been defined and crystallized out of the gate.
Yeah. Let's talk about, I know this is kind of a Q&A and we're answering people's questions, but let's talk about that for a second, because you and I are on the same page. I thought we would be, and I'm glad that we are. I think that is such a critical piece. And a lot of times people want to rush the process, right? So maybe it's, and to slow them down sometimes can be challenging, but it is so critical. So can you just kind of talk for a minute on when you have a client who wants to rush the process, what do you do to get them to slow down and increase their awareness on the importance of that and take the time? Because I think people are all of a sudden saying, like, here's my budget, I don't have time to do the extra. Well, in my opinion, you have to.
Yeah.
So what's the step-by-step, process and the mindset that you have to get them in to slow them down to think the right way so you can do your magic?
Sure. Well, the first thing I think you're going to want to do in a situation like that is you want to present the client or the brand with indisputable data, right? That they really can't argue. So if you were to hire us, Jon, and right out of the gate, you tried to get us to rush the process. By rushing the process, maybe you tried to get us to force your message before we thought your messaging was ready. We'll obviously guide you, and we can tell you based on our expertise and our experience and our intuition, you should take a step back and you're not ready yet. You really need to define your messaging first. But at the end of the day, the best way for us to really get that point, across to you is to give you outside evidence and fact-based data to back it up that's indisputable. So like, here's an example of something we might do in that scenario. Rather than us telling you, Jon, you're not ready, your messaging needs to be crystallized. It's all over the place. This is never going to resonate, with the mainstream media or on social media or whatever channels you're looking to hit. We would probably say, look, give us a day or two. Let us form a focus group for you, and we'll actually pull in some influencers, contacts of ours in the media, analysts that we're close with, social media influencers that we have good relationships with, and we'll just bounce your messaging off of them and come to you with their thoughts. And a lot of times when a client hears that we're giving them feedback on behalf of a focus group that's not just the agency, they tend to take it a little bit more seriously. So that's the first thing I would sort of do to manage you if you came out of the gate with a little bit of an overly aggressive and maybe unrealistic push that you might not be ready for.
Yeah. I love how you talked about the word indisputable. That's such a great word. It reminds me of when I was in real estate. I worked at a company called Marcus & Millichap for a long time. And the CEO at one point was Harvey Green. He was the CEO, I think, for 17 years, give or take. I can't remember exact number. But he was just cool. He was just a badass. And he always used to say, and I got this line from him, you can't negotiate fact.
You can't. It's like being a parent. I have three beautiful but stubborn young girls at home, Viviana, Valentina, Simona, right? And it's the same thing with them. It's like, I can tell them all the time, they can't wear this, or it's, you can't have candy 6 times before 9 p.m., whatever. But at the end of the day, I'm their father, right? If you pull people in, from the outside world to tell them that, they're going to listen. And it's really the same thing with clients sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I have 2 kids, 15 and 12, soon to be 16 and 13. But Harvey Green, if you're listening, it stuck with me. You can't negotiate fact. It's indisputable. Indisputable. All right. So here's a question that came in from a couple different people. Yep. And I think this is a really tough question, I think, for people to answer to get to. So I think you're going to be really helpful in this. What are the characteristics in in hiring the right internal marketing person. To me, having this is my opinion. I'm giving my own opinion right now. I think it's really important to have, if you're big enough to have your internal marketing person, but you also need an external marketing group to give you perspective on the pulse of things that you aren't seeing.
Sure.
And marketing to me is all about different lenses and seeing and other people's opinion. And it can be the nuance can be so small, but the value is so huge in an outside perspective. My own 2 cents.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I can just tell you from our experience as someone who's built an in-house marketing team, and we're a marketing agency, so we kind of can see from both perspectives. And I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here, but the first thing is, I think it's important if you're hiring an in-house resource that person or people or that team understands the culture of the organization and the ethos and the brand, because those are the people, that internal team essentially is going to carry the flag for the brand, right? So it's, super, super important that they understand the company's values, the culture, the ethos, everything that the brand stands for. And in, my philosophy, running N6A is that I would prefer, and when we built our internal marketing team, we promoted from within. We looked internal when we finally put ourselves in a position where we could afford to have our own internal marketing team. We promoted from within because the leader of that team was somebody who had been with our organization for a while, already knew our culture, was super committed, incredibly talented, but also, just really understood, what we were all about. So it made that decision very easy. So the first thing I would do is, if you're hiring an internal team, look for somebody or a team that really understands the culture and what the company stands for. So that's number one. The second thing, and this is where it gets a little contradictory, is as you're building the team, it's also important that you benefit from outside perspectives and fresh perspectives, because your brand is always evolving, and it's a living, breathing organism that's changing each and every day. So sometimes, as you build your internal team, even though my philosophy is you're better off starting internal if you can and promoting from within, as you grow the team, look outside, because as the brand grows, you're going to want to benefit from fresh perspectives and somebody who can kind of look at things and challenge you a little bit more, and someone who gets an opportunity to look at the brand without a legacy perspective. So that's kind of how I would look at that if I was building a team.
Yeah. I think that's really smart, and that's some good insight. I just want to mention something too about your culture, because you have a lot of signature programs at your company that you have implemented. The N6 Getaway Vacation Competition, the N6A Bucket List Weekend Competition, the N6 Leg AC PTO Package, and the N6A Chairman Pick Award. So I know that those seem like a lot of fun things, which is why you've been selected as probably one of the coolest spaces at the hottest PR firms by the New York Observer. And so it's just very cool. And so just to kind of piggyback on what you said, you want somebody who comes in and really connects to that.
Totally. And absolutely. I mean, and when we built our internal marketing team, God, I'm trying to think now, it's probably, 2 to 3 years ago, John. And all the stuff you just mentioned, our cultural programs and our competitions and our perks, we promoted from within. When we created that marketing team, we had somebody who was a rock star who had been here for several years before then. So there really wasn't much of a learning curve. The leader of the team, she just got it, right? She understood all of that and sort of inherited that from day one. So for us, that was a major advantage, as opposed to having to look outside and hire somebody, who needed to be trained and educated on all of the stuff we do from a cultural standpoint. Our leader just got it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And just one thing I want to mention on recruiting, which I think is important, is, interview people 2, 3, 4 times, have other people interview them, be very careful. Sometimes use a personality test, do background checks, do the best you can to really spend time recruiting and making sure that, Matt, everything you said, I think is critical. And even at that point, you still have a 50% chance that they're going to work, because you hope that the person you interviewed actually shows up. So if you can't promote from within, sometimes you have a higher probability. So build that bench, build that bench.
I'll never forget, John. I'll never forget when I first started our business. God, it was like literally like our first week or two in business. I got advice from somebody who was like, look, because we didn't have any employees, obviously, back then. I mean, it was just me in my basement. And he said, as you hire, I think he said, if you get 25% right, then you've done a good job. And I remember being young and stupid and naive and saying, this guy is crazy. I was like, if I get 25% of my hires right, you're going to find me on a ledge somewhere.
Yeah.
And then now, 10 years later, I think our success rate is better than 25%, but he was definitely right. I mean, getting hires, and we're very rigorous now in how we go through the recruiting process.
Sure.
We're very selective, and, that success rate, even with that level of rigor and discipline, is very difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult. I always say this jokingly, but it's kind of serious. Business is easy. People make it difficult.
Yeah, that's right.
And so of course it's critical to study business, but it's even more critical to study people and to study the communication of how you interact with people, which is why I'm so mesmerized by businesses like yours as well, because it's all about how to communicate and connect with people, their minds, their hearts, their psyches, their DNAs, just so much. I love it. But I know we have a couple minutes left. I want to get to a couple more questions. Sure. So here's one that came in from, again, a lot of people and comes up all the time for people are asking me, what's the best way to use social media to market myself, and how often should I post?
Look, social media nowadays, I mean, that's such a loaded question too, John, because you're talking about, are you a B2B brand or a B2C brand, or are you promoting a personal brand versus a corporate brand, right? So, the strategies obviously are going to vary significantly depending on where you fit into that. Also, what growth stage are you at? Are you a startup? Are you an emerging brand? Are you an enterprise? Are you the incumbent in the space? So it's just such a broad question, but generally speaking, social media nowadays, it's all about content, right? And it's about leveraging smart, innovative, consumable content to your target audience across, whatever the platform might be. So that's, the name of the game in social today is content. And then obviously strategies are going to pivot depending on where you fit into that growth ecosystem and, what industry you're in. But, social media is content nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think the word that you use is so spot on, which is smart content. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily. I know people who post, 3, 4 times, 5 times a day on certain platforms, but their content is smart content, and I think that's the key. And, as long as it attracts the audience that you want and it's smart, I love content, and I think it's great. So, all right. So I want to we have a couple minutes left. I want to just ask a couple questions about you. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and your background? Because for those who are listening, for those who will listen in the replay and things of that nature, I think it's important that they get to know a little bit about you because you've shared such great wisdom. Tell them a little bit more about you and your firm and the types of clients that you represent.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just real quick, 30 seconds on me. I got started working at Sony BMG out of college. I was working in-house, handling all of the domestic marketing and PR for a lot of their international artists. And that's kind of when I got my first taste of PR and marketing. And this was back in 2006, 2007, that time frame. And the second .com bubble, was really starting to take shape, to take form, and agency jobs were really hot, in demand within the tech space. And that's when I began my journey on the agency side. I, worked my way up the ranks and really earned my stripes representing a lot of clients, tech clients in emerging tech categories when e-commerce and email marketing and those kind of hot button tech categories were starting to become popular. And I got the entrepreneurial bug then a few years later in late 2009. I was just before my 27th birthday. I came home and had a crazy idea with my wife, 8 months pregnant, to start an agency of my own. And she gave me her blessing to do that. I don't know why to this day she did, but she did. And we started the agency out of my basement, N6A agency. Had no money at the time. We had no paying clients. And now here we are almost a decade later. We have about 60 clients, 50 employees. We have 3 offices. Clients of ours are spread across 30 different industries. So B2B, B2C, healthcare, retail, food and beverage, entertainment, cannabis, cybersecurity, financial services, you name it. We're probably working with a client in one of those industries, and at all stages of growth. Some clients that are listeners of yours who are at the startup phase, we work with those kind of clients. We work with clients that are elevated past the startup phase and are really looking to challenge the legacy, dominant players in their market. And in some cases, we work with enterprise brands that are already, the leaders in their space and are looking to continue to, to keep that tradition going.
It's awesome. You built an amazing business. In the times that we've connected, it just continues to impress me on your pulse on not only the business but clients and what you're doing to grow them. I'm a big believer that marketing is about getting clients in the door and growing your business and growing your brand. And I think marketing and advertising and PR and being a brand communications agency is so critical, because today I think it's so hard to separate your brand from other brands. And I think just what you do and how you do it is great. And I can't thank you enough, Matt, for being on Business Talk and sharing your wisdom, because just like in my interview with you in the podcast, it's going to help so many people get clarity. And I hope people pick up the phone and give you a buzz. Give me your website real quickly.
Yeah, sure. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in talking to us about your own brand's PR marketing, go to N6A.com. That's our corporate website. If you're listening to this and you're interested in a career at N6A, coming to work for us, we're always recruiting great talent, who can really embrace our culture. And we have a recruiting website, competeandcare.com, which goes over all of our cultures and some of the perks you mentioned earlier and all that good stuff.
And give me your phone number.
My phone number, 212-334-9753. That's our main office number here.
I love it. Who doesn't want to work for a 212 area code? It's one of the best. All right, Matt, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. This was awesome. And thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom today. You dropped a lot of